Cool. I should probably hold the book I'm reviewing, but I simply don't want to do that. It's in another room. I'm doing it. I'm making a video. So this is not going to be a very long video. I did say my next video is probably going to be reviewing books recommended by friends. I didn't do a July reading wrap up because most of the books I read will be in that video, so I don't want it to be like redundant, because I feel like if I do a July reading wrap up with the same books as the books recommended by my friends, it makes that video redundant. So Piranesi is one I considered putting in that video, but it's been recommended so many times, and like the reason why I picked it up was because of internet reviews, so it didn't feel right putting it in that video. Do I look really like little down here? So I'm making a separate video just doing it is going to be a spoiler-free review of Piranesi. So again, not going to be the longest video, but the fact that I'm even making a video right now, please clap. I've discussed Piranesi a little bit because I think I did a June reading wrap up where I talked about how I started Piranesi and very quickly finished it. It's a very short book, but I wanted to finish the book before I talked about it, before I gave a review and synopsis, because I feel like you had to. But I'm not gonna give an in-depth synopsis, and I'll explain why. First of all, I want to say I changed my mind. I don't agree that it is no plot, just vibes. I understand why people say that, because like sure, maybe for the first like 100 pages it seems very much like vibes, but I felt like it was more so world building and getting into the mind of the protagonist before it got into any sort of plot. So I also understand why people made DNF because of that, but I highly urge that you keep reading. What I do agree with that I've seen other people talk about is it is best going into this blind. It is best to go into this with little to no knowledge about the book. So if you want to stop here, I completely understand, but again, I'm going to keep my synopsis very brief. My knowledge going in was like something labyrinth. I honestly feel like I maybe heard about the labyrinth part in passing, and so it didn't even really stick with me. I was just like, it's a fantasy book, and it wasn't even fantasy in the way I expected. All I'll say for the synopsis is it's following Piranesi, who lives in this labyrinth type world. That's literally the shortest synopsis I think I've ever given for a book, but it's so important to me that people, I don't want to be like have the same experience I have or I had, but it truly felt like not knowing anything really beyond that made it that much more intriguing. I could not put the book down. Again, even when it was that first 100 pages where it's not really into the plot yet, I was still like, okay, but like what's gonna happen? And I was so intrigued by the mind of the protagonist as well. I was so intrigued by the world that even before the plot came in, I was like, I gotta keep reading this. And like I said, I read it very fast because of that, and it's a short book. But then especially when we got into the plot, I could not put it down. I felt like I didn't have that much difficulty. So I don't remember what I was saying. I know I was saying like once we got into that plot, I really truly couldn't put it down, and I was like, I have to finish this tonight. So it was one of those kinds of books. What is going on here? I'm trying to word this in a way that it doesn't come across like conceited or pretentious, but even when it was like when the plot started coming together and like some little pieces I had picked up even before then that I was like, yes, this all makes sense, it still felt like such a reveal, even knowing prior, which like I said, I didn't go into this with knowledge, but even like picking up on the hints prior as to what was gonna happen, it still was kind of mind-blowing. It was just so like, I don't know what other word to use for it other than intriguing. Really, really made you think. That's such like a surface level criticism. I think most books make you think at least a little bit. You have to use your brain to read. I think it was an interesting thought experiment, I guess is a way to put that. I think I really sat there and after I finished really thought about and tried to digest what the message could have been. But the thing is, like, maybe there wasn't even a message. I don't think books have to be didactic in teaching you a lesson and that kind of stuff. Again, it could have just been the author's little thought experiment. I just like to pick things apart and have to wonder, oh, does this mean this, and that kind of stuff. I think it's a fun practice, but also good for like critical thinking and just like exercising your brain in general to do that, to analyze all sorts of media. I love to do it with films as well. I'm going on a tangent no one asked for. But I think that also has to do with like active media consumption versus passive media consumption. None of this has anything to do. But that being said, with Piranesi, I feel like this definitely isn't a book you can be passive with, and I try not to be with any book, to be fair, but like I was saying, it makes for an interesting thought experiment, and it is fantasy, and I think the world building was unique. And the way I was saying that it like seems to do a lot of world building and getting into the mentality of just kind of who, not necessarily who the protagonist is, but how they think, which would be the mentality of the protagonist in that kind of first half, maybe a little less than half of the book, is important to do before getting into the plot, because the way they really mix together, the way it kind of sets that up, it didn't feel like it was insufferable pacing. It didn't come off as a pacing issue. I did like hear that people DNF because of this, and I can understand, as I already said, but for me, it wasn't like it was boring or anything like that until it got into the plot. So at the same time, like, I don't necessarily agree with disliking that first half or being bored by that first half. That's just my opinion of that first half. I didn't find it boring or unlikable or anything like that, or unenjoyable, though I can understand how people can be bored or feel like it's not going anywhere or anything like that. But my personal take is that it set up the plot. It was good to get into that. So then when the plot came in, it was like, oh, okay. Like, it's just adding another layer to it that you already set up in this world, in this mind, that you could really take it in and focus on that. Hopefully I'm articulating that well, but I just want, like, that's all to say that I enjoyed my experience reading this, and I didn't find any issues with the pacing or anything like that. And I completely understand, like, this book was so hyped up to me. Like I said, online, I was seeing a lot of, like, my algorithm was really pushing it to me, and in person, people were recommending it to me, and I completely understand why. It is not a book that I think is overhyped. I have talked about many popular books that I have found to be overhyped. This was one that I was like, oh, I'm so happy I read this, and I completely understand why it got the hype that it did, especially when I was seeing a lot of reviews that were just like, it's no plot, just vibes. I was like, how is a book that's no plot, just vibes that popular? And like I said, I do disagree with that description of it, though I do understand where it comes from. And I do also understand people saying that, because if people are expecting the plot to just start off right off the bat, then I think that might be another reason why people may have more trouble getting into it. So I do think it's important to set up that, I guess, expectation that it's not going to be right into the plot. I know this is, again, really short review, and I feel like it's been kind of all over the place. Moral of the story is I really enjoyed it and highly recommend it, especially if you like fantasy. If you are looking for a fantasy world that is not the traditional fantasy world, it is not a Tolkien-esque fantasy world or anything like that. It is not a fae fantasy world. It is different than any fantasy type story I have read recently. The only thing that I feel like there's a little nod to in popular fantasy is like Greek mythology. Even then, I feel like it is such a unique story that I definitely recommend people try it. I know it's been around and popular for a few years now, so not the first to recommend it, but if people were curious about my reading experience with that, because I was just thinking, I don't know when I would review it if I'm not doing a July reading wrap up, and I wouldn't put this in the recommendation by friends because I can't like pinpoint one friend or anything like this in the video that I'm setting up that video in a specific way that this didn't fit in with. I don't know, but stick around for that video. It might be a couple more weeks. I'm not posting as consistently right now, and I apologize for that. I'm trying my best. But thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you when I see you. I'll try my best. I know I was doing really well at posting once a week, and again, I really enjoy it, so maybe eventually I'll get back to that, but we will see. We'll just see. We'll just have to see how this goes. I'm getting very hot from these lights. So, bye!